What is going on, geeks? Snow Jive from the Geek Week here, and today we've got an interesting one. In the past few months, I've been playing a lot of fighting games on the channel, particularly retro fighting games from the era where arcades reigned supreme. Now, I should probably mention, I'm not actually from that golden era, being born in 1995. By the time I was playing video games, it was the early 2000s, and the era of home consoles had taken over. More importantly, video games have cemented their first steps in the world of 3 dimensions. Now, it's not like I never came across an arcade cabinet growing up, but on the rare occurrence I did, it was more akin to like finding the coolest ancient relic rather than playing a video game. To the unfamiliar, the arcade controls seem like a foreign language, and of course the 2D sprite work was not to the standards set by my top-of-the-line PlayStation 1. Which in retrospect is actually hilarious because there's honestly way too many classic arcade games whose 2D sprite work still hold up and look just as beautiful today, while with PlayStation 1 on the other hand, yeah, don't get me wrong, we had some great times, but I don't think many of those games are earning praise for visuals in the year 2024. But that's what this video is going to be about. My experience as a lifelong casual fan of games, particularly fighting games, growing up in the early 2000s. And why we're seeing the growth we are today in the industry of fighting games. Now, to be clear, I am most certainly a casual player. I always was, and I always will be. I have no desire to compete in video games on any professional level, I just enjoy playing them, and for some reason particularly, fighting games. And I'm honestly just curious to know if anyone else shared similar experiences. Now, as I mentioned previously, at the time I really became of age to actually start playing video games, the industry had really taken the first steps toward the future of gaming with 3D graphics and CGI cutscenes, the whole 9 yards. It's a shame to admit this, but at the time, I almost saw 2D games as simply inferior, or not as high quality compared to those in 3D. Now, it's not as if I didn't play 2D games, but for some reason I always just thought that they were reserved for handheld devices like my Game Boy Advance and SP. It wouldn't be until years later when I picked up a copy of Darkstalkers simply based on the artwork, and it begun to change my perspective a bit, not only on spriteworks, but on classic games in general. I should add, a copy of Darkstalkers on the PSP no less. The PSP. A console ahead of its time. But that's a topic for another day. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind a bit. Now also, as I mentioned before, though a casual, I have always loved fighting games. I'm not sure if that's the anime lover in me that always attracted me to the genre, because Lord knows I played all the anime fighters growing up, or perhaps it was just the simplicity of being able to mash buttons and make cool things happen on the screen. Whatever the case, I've always been playing them, and I've always enjoyed it. The anime fighters like the Dragon Ball Budokai series, Yu Yu Hakusho The Dark Tournament, I mean fam, I even had Zatch Bell Mamoto battles, we was getting into it. All the way down to your legacy fighters like Tekken, Soul Calibur, even Bloody Roar Primal Fury. There are so many more titles, and of course even games that are more wrestling than even fighting games, like Ultimate Muscle, Def Jam 1 and 2, so many great games, so many great memories. Now I bring all that up to point out that this was also long before the days of internet, and the people I was playing in those early days were my peers. With the little TV set up in my garage, I have all my buddies over and we'd mash to our heart's content, which is honestly what every fighting game fan wants, right? People with similar skill levels to play with. Which brings up one of the biggest gaps between fighting games and casual players. Accessibility. Now that we're living in the time where more people are playing online than in person, it can be a nightmare finding people around your skill level to play. Well, if you can't find people around your skill level to play, how do you get better? Well, I think we just got a wonderful answer to that in recent time with Street Fighter 6 and the implement of modern controls, making it simpler for someone not familiar with arcade inputs. Now, fun fact, I haven't actually played Street Fighter 6 myself personally, nor have I played any video games on a system that isn't Nintendo in over a decade, but again, a story for another time. But from what I can gather, it reduces the system to just 4 buttons, also with single button supers. I can only imagine how many people have gotten into fighting games through this, and I almost wish they had this when I was growing up, because as I said before, command lists always looked so foreign to me as a kid. Although now, personally, I've found myself going in the opposite direction, in recent months really practicing arcade inputs as I try to discover more and more classics I overlooked growing up. All the same, I really hope to see more things like this in the future. It really helps grow the community. Now let's go back to the early 2000s for a moment. Aside from an old Mortal Kombat 3 cabinet that was at my barbershop when I was a kid, the only place you ever saw an arcade cabinet at was during a birthday party at Doc's Funhouse or Chuck E. Cheese. Whatever happened to Chuck E. Cheese, by the way? Like, when did that become the primetime spot for UFC Unleashed? I used to be there playing Ninja Turtles Shell-Shocked, now people be throwing combos in real life. But I digress. There within lies another hurdle the fighting game industry finally seems to be climbing, and that is marketing. And in more ways than one. The first being their appeal to, you guessed it, casual players. And I can definitely attest to this. As a casual growing up, I was pretty much going to play a fighting game until me and my friends got bored with it, then it was on to the next one. With the addition of more and more non-competitive modes like challenges and story modes, fighting games had infinitely more replayability. As time goes on, we see more and more games include offline content for players, and although I personally enjoy playing with others, especially now that I create content and all, I do love having the extra features in fighting games. If only to familiarize yourself with the mechanics and whatnot, it is actually quite nice. The second, being a bit more obvious, is just marketing in the literal sense. Now, I can only speak from the perspective of someone who was very young growing up in the United States during the early 2000s, but I don't recall seeing very many fighting games advertised on commercials or in stores as a kid. Now, without a doubt, I recall Smash Bros. And Dragon Ball video game commercials, but the vast majority of the fighting games I played, I picked up on the cover art alone. Remember, this is long before the days of YouTube and Google having the answers to everything, so a lot of times it was just a shot in the dark picking out a new or used game. And, in a strange way, a part of me misses that ignorance. Simpler times. But there's one memory in particular that sticks out from growing up liking fighting games, and that was actually during the Wii era. Now, it may have been a commercial that alerted me to this game, but I'm not positive because if it was, it most certainly didn't run often. But that game was Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, and I was obsessing over getting it. I had no prior history with either series. Obviously, I was aware of Street Fighter, and I was very much a fan of the anime and the movie, but the game fell into that arcade era that I was so unfamiliar with. At any rate, the art style to the game was right up my alley, and it was coming out for the Nintendo Wii. It was a dream come true. The only problem, I couldn't actually find the game anywhere. Now, to be fair, I'm sure there wasn't that many people in the United States actually waiting on a fighting game for the Nintendo Wii. I mean, I was the only person I knew that actually knew what the game was. But when I say anywhere, I do mean anywhere. Now, this is back in 2008, so I'm pretty sure I could have ordered it. But this was way before Amazon and online shopping was commonplace. And also, I was 12, without a credit card, and actively pissing off my mom and dad on a daily basis. I mean, to this day, I still have never played Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. The one that got away. Why the Nintendo Switch barely ports any of its GameCube and Wii collection, I'll never know. But fast forward to today, and fighting games are more accessible than ever, and I'm honestly enjoying it so much more than I can express. That said, though I do believe accessibility is the biggest reason for the growth we're seeing in recent years, personally, I've been taking a journey through the old arcade classics and really appreciating an era of games I missed out on. Boy, what a journey it's been, full of hype and rage. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Just some random thoughts I felt I'd share. Get in the comments if you've experienced anything similar. I mean, that is why I made the video. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.